what are your three biggest keys for a potential Syracuse upset?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big game. It is an exciting game. And, you like to look at the Vegas spread and let that set your expectations. But there's a lot of ways a game can go. And it's not as extreme of an example, but we just saw in week 0, Iowa State's a 3-point underdog. They had to look at that number all off season, and then they just go out and win. So the way the game script plays out can really drastically impact sort of how the game goes. I think Syracuse has got to control the ball in this game, and they got to control the clock, especially with how volatile we've seen Tennessee's offense be at times recently, even last season. And part of it had to do with Nico's inconsistency. Tennessee had times where they straight up could not move the ball on offense, which is not what you would conventionally think of when you think of Josh Heupel. If you weren't really paying attention to Tennessee last year, you would have just assumed they got to the playoffs because they had a killer offense because it's Josh Heupel. The reality was Tim Banks absolutely rounded out that defense, and they had future NFL guys all over the place. James Pierce at one point was getting mocked number 1 overall. They won with defense and with an inconsistent, albeit solid running game and mediocre passing game last season. There's not a big indicator that Tennessee's just going to turn it on and figure it out, especially with Joey Aguilar. We'll talk about him a little bit more later, I'm sure. But one of the keys has got to be clock control. If I'm Syracuse, they've got the 2 new running backs this year. You've seen Will Nixon, pretty unproven production-wise, but and also a new look offensive line as well. A couple of transfers being infused up there. So controlling the ball. I mean, it sounds like a cliche, and it's something that you usually say, but that's going to be a very critical factor. Taking care of the football. Take care of the football. We saw Kansas State score 2 long bomb touchdowns against Iowa State. They had the more explosive plays, but they could not take care of the football, and neither could Iowa State, to be frank, but Iowa State avoided more of the turnovers. That's the big game we have to operate off of. That's why I've referenced it twice. But really 2 of the major keys, I think, would be right there. And then the third, we kind of alluded to it just a second ago, attack that Tennessee secondary. See if they're going to hold up this season. I talked about the job Tim Banks did revamping that defense last year. Jermod McCoy, their top defender, one of the best DBs in the country, and he's healthy. He's going to be out, I believe, for most of the season with recovering from a torn ACL. And then you talked a little bit about Boo Carter in before this show when we were talking. He's questionable. He just returned to team activities. So maybe a little bit more thin in the secondary. We'll see. It's a big part of Syracuse's offense, but they're definitely going to have to take their shots and try to take advantage of that Tennessee secondary.
I want to go back to that first key because it really relates to Syracuse last year as far as ball control. Syracuse on defense last year, you look at the numbers, not very good. But one way they were able to mitigate that, they kept the defense off the field. In other words, the offense was very good with time of possession. If you go back and look at the stats, I think on average, Syracuse last year controlled the ball for 33 minutes per game, which led the ACC. So as bad as their defense was a year ago, it wasn't on the field all that much. So if they could just get that stop or 2, they were okay because they knew the offense would have the ball and they knew the offense was going to go down the field and put up some points. Let's talk about Joey Aguilar here, all right? From Appalachian State, he's got talent. He can run a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and call him Lamar Jackson, but he's athletic. He's mobile. He can run. How do you think they're going to use him? Because, like it or not, Tennessee fans have pointed it out to me. Josh Heupel, his offenses, they mitigate turnovers with quarterbacks. That's great. But can you do it with a guy like Joey Aguilar, who 24, 25 interceptions the last couple of years, Tyler? How do you think they're going to use him in week 1?
Yeah, I have faith that most quarterbacks, if they operate the system effectively, can be good in that Josh Heupel system. We've seen it time and time again. You plug in the right guy and they can do well. Nico at times had the inconsistency, but for the most part, quarterbacks in the Josh Heupel system look like robots. They get the ball, they turn, and they pass to their first option the majority of the time. It's what Hendon Hooker did, and he ended up getting drafted in like the first couple of rounds because of how great he looked. I believe he got waived today by the Lions, by the way. So you're going to see, I think, a more robotic Joey Aguilar in this system. I think you're going to see him hand the football off a lot because that Tennessee running game is what they hang their hat on. Last season, that was a big part of them. And if their tailback didn't go down with an injury, maybe we would have seen a little bit more of a competitive game there against Ohio State in the playoffs last year. But that's besides the point. With Aguilar, I am just not super confident in him as a passer. because he's coming off of not his best season as a starter. His best season was not last year, but the year prior to that at App State. And you mentioned the interception. He threw 14 of them last season. And yes, there was some dysfunction, some inconsistency, but we're talking about Sunbelt defenses, which essentially nullifies the fact that you could say he had less great weapons around him. And then at Tennessee too, some of the weapons are not super proven this year. So I'm not super encouraged by what I have seen recently, but I think the Aguilar you are going to see is going to look a little bit more robotic, just like we've seen those Tennessee quarterbacks look recently.
So assuming Joey Aguilar, maybe he gives Syracuse one or two plays, and it's up to Syracuse at that point to make the plays when he gives them to Syracuse. And it's not meant to be disrespect. Again, even the best quarterbacks in the world, think of a guy like Josh Allen with the Buffalo Bills. Think of Brett Favre, who's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Once or twice a game, they're going to give you a freebie. You just have to be there for said freebie.